Okay, chapter 11. So we're starting to talk about fun adolescent years. I know some of you may like to think back. Some of you didn't have your adolescent years too long ago, but think back to the highs and the lows from that period and how you were changing physically and how you were changing mentally and how you were interacting with peers and interacting with parents. First of all, we'll talk about the physical development. Also wanted to say something interesting in the text is that adolescence is a concept that actually did not even exist, as you may recall in the first part of our, I think, chapter one. It didn't exist until the middle of the 19th century as a result of the Industrial Revolution. Um, and even more recent research has usually determined that adolescence is just this horrible time, right? But research has shown that it's really not that horrible of a time. That depends on your culture, of course, as well. But it also is just not as horrible as the media and others make it out to be. Okay, we're going to talk about physical development first. This is puberty, right? So, how does puberty begin? It begins with the pituitary gland, and it's stimulated by the hypothalamus, and in turn starts to produce hormones. Those hormones are released, and first primary and secondary sex characteristics start to occur. Um, Development of sex organs and acceleration in growth and height. So, primary sex characteristics are the organs that are needed for reproduction, like prostate gland, the testes, ovaries, etc. So, and you can see that on 253. Those organs mature during puberty. Um, Additionally, secondary sex characteristics are more like breast development, pubic hair, body hair in girls and boys. Testosterone is also increases in this period, and that increases muscle size, bone structure in males, contributes to changes in their vocal cords. Boys do have greater heart and lung increases than girls and thicker bones and more muscle tissues, and then girls have a bigger pelvic spread and breast tissue that occurs during this time. The big growth spurt, age 12 in girls and 14 in boys, and girls do mature faster. But something also interesting to me, here we go, the variety of the onset of puberty. If boys mature faster and they hit puberty sooner, the research shows that they have a better time. They're more accepted by peers. Conversely, when girls mature earlier, that is not the case. And often, sometimes puberty can be triggered by stress in the environment. The interaction between heredity and environment will cause puberty to happen sooner. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think sometimes that's important for us as counselors because we need to, if we have a child come in or preteen come in and they've already reached puberty at a younger age, that might be a clue that something's going on in the home. But also could be due to higher standard of living. And also, I've even heard, and this isn't in our text, a lot of the hormones and stuff in meat and milk and things like that. I don't know if any of you have heard that before, but for me, I always tried to get the organic milk for my children. I always try to use the meat without hormones for my children, just because I had read a lot about the adverse effects for having that in their bodies. So I don't know. That's not in your text, but interesting nonetheless. Oh, well, I already read all this. Look at that. Okay. So hormonal changes already went over. Just read over this. I was just talking about primary, secondary sex characteristics, testosterone. I think I've also said this, a lot of it. Um, Girls are beginning puberty earlier than males. Girls develop breasts like buds 9 to 10, increase in size over the next 3 to 4 years. pubic and underarm hair appear, oil and sweat glands develop. That's when, all of a sudden you realize they need to start using deodorant, right? You start to smell, and they never smell as children. I mean, they might smell sweaty when they're sweating, but they don't have like an odor, where they need um, deodorant and things like that. Like, oh, you need a shower. They start to have acne. And I talked about the pelvic area widening, etc., and all the sex organs growing, and then menstruation varies, like I said, depending on a lot of things in the child's life, like is stress going on that could um, stimulate the onset of puberty because of the stress hormones, but also maybe more nourishment. So, is the nourishment related to the hormones in the food? I'll have to look that up for you guys because now I'm thinking. Okay, it takes several years for girls to be fertile and capable of reproduction. However, I have seen, and we've all heard of children being pregnant at 13. So depends on when they started. Male development, males develop a little. You see the females here developing could begin here at 9 or 10, and we see the males developing around age 11 to 11 and a half. So they begin and you see that change, really in fifth and sixth grade when boys are still acting um, like children and the girls are starting to really, really mature. That there's a discrepancy there. You can really see that. Um, I don't know how many of you remember sixth grade, but a lot of the girls were a lot more mature than the boys. So that is interesting here. Okay, then they are not. Maybe some of the boys are just turning this age and has not even started this process in sixth grade. Um, 6 months later, the penis begins to grow rapidly, and around age 13, boys have their first ejaculation, and this is known as seminarche, and it signifies sexual maturation. You'll need to know that. That's important because if you have a 13-year-old boy, he could come in for counseling and be confused. Maybe, sometimes parents never talk to their children about these things, or they have religious views about things such as this, and this is looked at as bad or whatever. And so, as a therapist, you just kind of need to know what's happening in this age range and what could be going on with this child. Um, they don't have viable sperm until sometime after the first ejaculation. And then we talked about the deepening of voice and sweat glands already earlier. Okay. In adolescent health, obesity has really tripled over the past 25 to 30 years. I mean, we know that that has been a huge issue. We've talked about this in previous lectures because we know that obesity is an issue in earlier stages of development. But we know that gaming and internet and TV and all of that is really affecting that. And it's so important that we're mindful of that as parents and even as counselors because children who struggle with obesity are more likely to be bullied and have a lot of other health issues. So that can be a problem that needs to be addressed. The biological clocks change, and I learned this in my PhD. I didn't really know this, but I had a sleep researcher, Dr. Buckle, with my professor at Auburn, and he's a sleep researcher, and he and his wife have written so many articles on sleep and have done some groundbreaking research on sleep. And teens tend to do better if they can sleep later in the morning. Um, and most teens don't get adequate sleep. That's why they're tired all the time. Hard to get them up in the morning. Do you guys remember that? You remember how awful it was to get up in the morning when you were in high school? I do. Substance abuse can be a problem. It's not as much of a problem as the media makes it out to be. I think our shows or culture makes it out to be, but it is the leading cause of death and also car accidents related to substance abuse. So those are really important things to be watching for and looking for high-risk behaviors. Of course, everyone knows that more involvement in sports and extracurriculars reduces likelihood of drug and alcohol abuse. And one of the reasons for that, and I'm teaching substance abuse in the fall, I'm actually ready to teach that again. Um, I was so burnt out. I mean, I don't know how many of you know that I did substance abuse counseling really from '05 to 2014, and I was burnt out. I still do it a little bit. I do EMDR and substance abuse. I know when I first got to LaGrange, Dr. Callahan asked me to teach. Did I want to teach substance abuse? And I said no. I said I'll teach anything but that. But I had just every day and I loved it, but there was a lot of factors for that, and I just needed a break. So I have an advanced certification in substance abuse. I had to take another exam to get that certification. It was very hard. I remember that. And I had to do 10,000 hours of substance abuse counseling. I mean, I have a ton of experience with it. And I've counseled all ages for substances, up to 80 down to 10, 12, something like that. So looking forward now to, I've got my books and I'm getting ready. I'm excited about teaching you guys in the fall about, we'll have fun. We'll have fun with this. But anyway, what was that? Some kind of little sound that just happened in my house. All right, I'm going to pause this for a second. I think there's something else I want to say about this. I don't know that I pause it. I don't think, but I'll be right back. I know what I wanted to say. Drug use in adolescence is super hard to treat. I think I talked about this before in that 18 to 24-year-old range and how it's so difficult to treat people in that age. And I would echo that even more prior to 18. I did an adolescent substance abuse group for a couple years before I had Helen. I may have shared some of this. I'll probably talk a lot about these experiences in the fall. And I loved those kids dearly. I was very creative in the ways I tried to work with them, but it was so difficult. I think it's very difficult because of brain development for adolescents to see the consequences for their actions. Read the case of Amaya here on 11.1 on page 254, please, and get a good idea of what that looks like. Just lack of awareness on adolescents' parts. All right, moving on to body image and eating disorders. This is so important. I've had multiple eating disorder cases that they didn't present to me that way. I don't typically see eating disorders, and the reason for that is I will see eating disorders and I can work with eating disorders, but I have to have a nutritionist. I have to have a team involved with the care. The sad thing about what I've noticed with this is that I can't always get the parents on board. I know that's probably shocking to you, but um, tried to get an eating disorder specialist involved in the medical field if you are not a specialist. That way they can monitor the weight and the food and all of the things that they need to monitor, and I can do the coping, etc. But these are big, big problems. Girls seem to suffer from these more than boys, but do not think that boys don't have them because they do. It is extremely terrifying because these these children die from this. Um, so it's important that you know what anorexia nervosa is and bulimia nervosa. Understand what contributes to it, but especially in girls with this poor body image. Um, Anorexia, of course, is self-starvation. It is increasing in males. It usually begins in mid-adolescent years when children start to become obsessed about their weight. These individuals, they have a relentless, I like what the text says, a relentless pursuit of thinness. They have a very distorted body image. They weigh themselves obsessively, weigh less than 85% of what their normal body weight should be. And that BMI, we talked about body mass index, is less than 18. They can't see themselves correctly. Usually perfectionist and hold themselves to high standards. Um, they can't live up to self-imposed standards. They need to feel perfect. So that would be, as an EMDR therapist, I have to be perfect. Is it negative cognition that we work on? We're talking about some cognitive development in a minute, but we're talking about helping them. I do not have to be perfect. That's been imposed on them through society and through us as parents. We don't realize often how we, um, when we're demanding excellence from children, are convoluting that message to say they need to be perfect. Um, I myself have been, in the way that I've talked sometimes, realized, wait a minute, keep talking to Helen like that about grades and stuff. I need to be careful how I'm talking to her about good grades and stuff because we always want to praise the effort and not make them think they have to be perfect. Okay, let's see. Comorbidity issues to look for depression, anxiety, OCD, low self-esteem. Treatment is imperative and difficult because thin is seen as beautiful in society. And family therapy is so important in getting an expert. And I would say if you want to work with this population, get extra training. I've had extra training, get extra training in this. You can become a specialist, you can become certified. There's nobody in our town that does it specifically. So if you're interested, you could have quite a following, I'm sure. I couldn't find anyone really until Peachtree City. So if you're really interested in this, this is a good niche for the area. Bulimia is binge eating consumption. People eat the whole cake and then purge. They throw up. Let's see. But also could be using laxative, diuretic, over exercising. They're obsessed with food. Most are not substantially overweight, but they see themselves as overweight. You begin sometimes anorexia, more prevalent in women. And women feel ashamed and they hide it. They usually lie about what they eat, avoid eating in public, and have anxiety related to food. Cognitive counseling approaches can be effective in treating. So your forum response for this week for 11 is going to require you to do a little digging. Excuse me. I want all of you to go and research. Go and look up. Google is fine. You can go to peer-reviewed articles if you want. Go find what you can find is the most effective treatment for eating disorders in adolescence would be. They say cognitive. Cognitive what? What kind of cognitive therapy? There's a whole lot of those, isn't there? You've learned. You know them. Which one? And is that it? What else do you do? I want you to know how to do that. Yay. That's your forum. That should be kind of fun, right? Oh, don't forget, no class next week. I'm about to record 12, so you'll have that now. Excuse me. I'll also probably do 13, 14, and 15 before next week. I'll have those up. And developmental interview is the week after the 4th, at the end of the week. So if you want to try to get ahead and get some stuff done, you can get all that out of the way and maybe take a break next week. Don't forget that. Something else important I was going to tell you, but I'll wait. Cognitive development, brain development. We know the brain is developing quite a bit in the adolescent stages of development. The synaptic connections are strengthened, and then other connections are not used or pruned off. The corpus callosum thickens, and the amygdala, which is where the fear-based memories are housed, matures. This is where we see the problem in helping adolescents understand the consequences of their prefrontal cortex and subcortical regions. They improve, but they're not fully grown. But they are beginning to be able, by 18, to have abstract, flexible, relativistic thought. They're starting to be able to reason more and problem solve. Every teen is not the same, and they have a really difficult time controlling impulses and processing social and emotional information. Okay, and this here's our friend Piaget. We're now getting into the formal operational stage. So we're going through Piaget's stages. And you see that in every lecture. Really, we talk about Piaget because you have to know all of Piaget. So I'll always ask you probably on the quiz about Piaget. So just know Piaget. I think I say that how many times? Oh, I remember what I was going to tell you. I really hope people are listening to these because I'm telling you all sorts of information about the program. Um, so I try to make them short, sweet, and to the point. But your portfolios, we're going to do a mid review of your portfolio. And I know, don't freak out. Remember, I think I told y'all we got the go ahead from KCREP and we're working on our site visit packet. That does not mean they're coming anytime soon. They are backlogged from the pandemic, but I sent an email and said it was imperative that they see us as soon as possible. So we will see what happens with my advocacy. But for us, but golly, I have frog in my throat this morning. The other thing is this. You guys remember in your foundational courses, you have key assessments, right? You have these key assessments for us to assess your knowledge, and we'll need those for the first year. It will include the key assessment from this class. So we're waiting until the summer semester is over to get your portfolios. I'm going to send a detailed email, but you will really submit in OneDrive. We decided I'm sorry, no, Google Docs, because all of you have that. Google Doc, you'll share your Google Doc with Dr. Miller, Dr. Powers, and me. And you'll have your portfolio set up for the first year. And you'll have your key assessments for each class. So you'll have, for this one, it's a Counseling 5011, and you would have your key assessment indicator in there. And then you will write a reflection about that. And that's kind of as far as we've gotten. This is something we just created last year when we wrote the self-study because we needed some other way to measure your success, and we rewrote a lot of things. So we went ahead and put those in the fall, and you knew about it, but I think that we decided it'll be submitted. Perhaps we were talking about the week of finals, but I think I'm going to move that to the first week of school with everything going on. That will give you guys 3 weeks after the end of the semester to kind of get it together. It's not going to be as bad as you think it is because we're putting it in chunks, right? So it's just the foundational areas of your coursework. And so you'll just have that one assignment to put in and talk about it and maybe talk about your growth and have like a formal reflection for the whole first year. Okay, now hopefully everyone listens to this lecture so they know about that. And I will even do another mini lecture just about it. And I will upload it for you guys because I think almost everyone that's doing it is in this class. I think everybody is in this class. So, Piaget. Back to Piaget. Okay, back to formal operations. This is where adolescents, they're able to hypothesize. They're able to do that hypothetical deductive reasoning like you would in a study. They're able to actually hypothesize and test things out and think about ideas and different outcomes, problem solve, be more analytical, also able to understand inside jokes, um, puns, and now like subtle humor. I've noticed my daughter, and this is that. Sorry, that's my phone beeping. The kind of the criticism is this not culturally appropriate, and sometimes children enter formal operations earlier. And Helen's about to turn 10, and I've noticed in the past year that she gets mine and Mark's inside jokes, um, things that they would never have gotten earlier on in life. So it's really interesting. They can detect inconsistencies. They're more reflective and speculative about themselves. They're beginning to engage in metacognition. And metacognition is the ability to think about thinking itself, which is like CBT, right? To analyze your thoughts. You really can't do that until this stage. That's higher order thinking. And I talked about hypothetical deductive reasoning already, information processing in this stage. You can, as an adolescent, obviously tackle more difficult problems. Working memory expands, and then three types of information that's stored in the long-term memory is declarative, procedural knowledge, conceptual knowledge. Declarative is factual knowledge. Factual. Sorry, I was coughing. My coffee went down the wrong way. So I don't want y'all are probably going, oh my gosh, Dr. Beale's got coronavirus. Okay. I was laughing. I was just thinking, I want to keep these lectures for next summer. It would be really, it's going to be interesting what's going on at that time. I'll have to do an ad lib on each chapter because um, the stuff I'm talking about is not going to pertain to them. So that'll be interesting. Knowing me, I'll probably re-record them all. Okay, here we go. Declarative, that's facts, like memorizing dates and big events like World War II, etc. Procedural knowledge is skills that have been learned, um, like riding a bike and playing an instrument. And conceptual knowledge is knowing why something is the way it is, understanding why it is that way. Processing more rapidly, skilled in that selective attention where they're able to screen out other um, information, other distractors, etc. Like right now, I'm able to try to focus on this. And a minute ago, the dryer went off, and my daughter's in the other room watching cartoons, and there was a squirrel outside, and I was still able to continue talking to you. Sometimes I take a break and tell you about these things so that you will stay awake, but that's a good example of how you can screen some of that out and keep focusing or doing your task, stay on task. Also, decision making and controlling impulses, become more attuned, a longer attention span, um, and then concepts that are more abstract, like freedom, love, and peace. Uh, they can process. They can start to process on that kind of concept and engage in that type of thought. There's considerable variation, and then cultural is very important. I think in Rwanda, formal operation tasks were not met that were in Britain and the U.S., and that comes from education and culture. So we had to be really careful too that we're not expecting a child, an adolescent, to have that met that stage, depending on what their history is and what their culture is. Moral reasoning. So teenagers become very concerned with morality. You start to see them develop like, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's what we should do something about this. We should stand up. There's a high priority on trust and loyalty, specifically with friends. Starting to explore political and social movements. Girls are more relational than boys and during this time. Um, so there's some existential examination as teens try to struggle to figure out who they are and what they will do with their lives. The philosophical, political, and religious issues. They're starting to question things or not, agree maybe with what they've been taught. Um, and then again later on that changes again. And moral development, we got Kohlberg again here. There were three levels of the moral development, and pre-conventional, that's good or bad. This is I'm going to try to do this because it feels good, and I'm going to avoid that because it feels bad. I'm going to try to escape punishment and go to reward if I can. And I'll explain something to you in a minute about this. And conventional, rule is a rule, okay? They focus on like law is law. Like basically, I'm following the law. This is the rule at school. I'm supposed to do this. They're trying to comply with social norms. Post-conventional is higher than that. That's where we go above and beyond outside of law is law. So Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King. There's two stages, like 5 and 6, above conventional. So there's 6 stages of moral development, and the top two, 5 and 6, social contract and what's that top one? I taught this forever, so that in substance abuse, there's this. I told you guys at some point there's this moral recognition therapy. Recognition's not a word. We looked it up. Based on Kohlberg, right? And there are these stages, and we went through pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional categories. Because in substance abuse, and you see this in a second, I'm talking about adolescence. Not everyone goes to conventional as an adolescent. They stay in pre-conventional. And when you stay in pre-conventional, um, that's like I'll scratch your reciprocities in there. I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. If you stay at that level, imagine the problems you're going to have in life if everything you do is for someone else to do something back for you. Or what are you going to give me? You see people operate like this, right? Or I'm going to do everything to feel good and not bad with drug use. Think about it. I'm going to do this because it feels good. There's no higher order moral thinking. And I do find issue with this. So I don't want you to think that I'm all in with this because I, I never did like MRT, moral recognition therapy. Y'all can look it up, MRT. There are multiple reasons why I don't like it, but I don't like anything to do with talking about too much about morals with drug use. I get the point, but I'm going to save all this for the fall. But you can see how that could be problematic, right? And even as a teen, if they're not starting to get to conventional, then they're going to start to make high risk choices to get pleasure and not understand the consequences of their behavior. And the post conventional is that higher order. So, like social contracts, like recycling, means not law, but you're doing it because it's for a greater good, and you're taking upon yourself to take extra steps to do that for the environment. That's a good example. Above that is you really putting yourself out there and sacrificing yourself for others. And we often don't get up to that stage. And when we do, we go up and come back down. We don't typically stay there. Not many of us are Mother Teresa. I don't know if she's always a good example. She really struggled with depression. That doesn't mean she wasn't a saint, but I don't know how many of you know that she really struggled with depression. Okay. I'm really giggling at this one because here, this is what it says. Like it or not, adolescents spend a great deal of time in school until COVID-19, that is. So um, now I don't know what this is going to look like, right? Everything may change in our landscape because of COVID. So middle school to high school can be very disruptive. There are a lot of issues at this age. Adolescents and teachers may be at odds. And also, teachers can be really strict in this age and probably not the best. Um, Making sure they're warm and compassionate and understanding of developmental levels, helping to build community in the school to decrease cliques. It's children who are alienated. It really increases their risk for a lot of issues in school. Um, so harsh discipline policies contribute to alienation, low teacher expectations, irrelevant curriculum, discriminatory practices, and perceived lack of control in the school environment. So those are all really important things to notice when you have a kid coming in at this stage of development and what's going on. And this is where you may have to advocate. Um, I've advocated for class switching. I've called principals. I get sometimes the parents in to build a better system for the student. Even at times, I know this may sound strange, even at times I've advocated for at-home school for the rest of the year while we work on increasing their um, self-esteem, self-worth, because it's gotten so bad for them that it's so counterproductive that nothing's going to get done, and they're horrified and terrified to go to school. If a child is in that kind of situation and they can do it, sometimes it's this, it's not you're telling them what to do, but you're giving them options because you're not seeing that you can help remedy the issue, assist this adolescent increasing their self-esteem and self-worth. We cannot do that in a session. So it's really interesting. School can be have a horrible impact on children. Um, Not all schools are safe, but students, of course, are going to achieve more when they're in a school that appears to be safe and high quality teachers, high standards. There needs to be a lot of nurturing and support. A lot of times that's not there, and that's what I'm talking about. You got to be able to look at that and say, "Hey, this isn't this isn't good." You got to trust your kid. We often don't listen to them, and it's so important. I pulled Helen out of pre-K because of her perception of her teacher is the best thing I ever did. I don't, Helen didn't like the doctor we went to. We switched doctors. I listened to my kids. We need to listen. They say, when they say something, we need to be aware. And that's not to say that it's not skewed to some degree, but if there's a situation with a teacher or an administrator, there's probably some truth to that. So make sure you're there for your client and you're listening, helping them cope with the situation. And if that doesn't work and you don't get them better that way, then advocacy could be secondary for how you advocate for this kid. Friends influence more than parents and teachers, especially doing homework and putting effort into classroom performance. That's why sometimes kids in higher classes do better because they're influenced by the peers in the gifted class or the advanced class. And it's also discriminatory because a lot of times that is not a fair process. So, um, but self-efficacy is key throughout our whole life, but especially here. If they believe they're good and they're motivated to learn, they'll put more effort in. It's a key for their success in school. Of course, there are gender and ethnic differences. Asian American students achieve more than Caucasian. Caucasian students achieve more than African American and Hispanic students. Of course, girls are better in verbal activities, whereas boys perform better in visual and spatial tasks. Um, Boys have more connective white matter, which is linked to visual and spatial performance needed in math and science. Girls have a larger corpus callosum, which affects language processing and allows girls a broader range of cognitive abilities, which has also hurt us and the perception of boys being better at math. It definitely hurt me as a child. I was definitely not probably in, because I'm 42, and before we started changing our strategies in schools to make sure that girls were included in thinking they could do math. So um, I struggled with math and didn't get there was no expectation, I guess, at that point. So there was a huge gender gap, and now um, girls are catching up. Like Helen is math whiz; she makes hundreds on all her math stuff. So I'm super excited about that. Also, lifespan development is going to help you um, throughout your whole career. So if you're counseling a couple, you can go back to this little nugget of information to help people understand how we process women and men process differently. Although the corpus callosum is larger in girls and boys and it affects language processing, because the corpus callosum connects the two brain hemispheres, girls have a broader range of cognitive abilities, which allows them to integrate left brain, verbal and analytical, and right brain, spatial and holistic tasks, where boys tend to operate within each hemisphere. That continues on. I know we develop more, and I'm stereotyping to some degree, but um, you see that um, the way our brains work in females and males is very different. Um, where females can kind of multitask and think about a lot of different things in different categories and things such as that. Um, Usually men are able to think about this thing and then the next thing. So it's not explaining that right, but also we're talking about the achievement gap with math for girls and boys, but I don't want to leave out that boys are often so that's not the opposite is true for them where they're saying, oh yeah, they're not verbal reading. So, we don't dissuade boys and men reading and being strong in that area, and also they're more likely to get in trouble and be remediated, and that's very sexist and very controversial because of course we're different and they might be not as compliant and teachers favor girls than boys, so there's issues on both sides here with this. We're almost done, guys. Wait, did I do gender and oh yeah, I did. Okay. The dropout problem. Dropout has been higher for low SES, specifically African American, Hispanic American students, from the intergenerational transmission of trauma in marginalized populations where I do that workshop, you know, this is akin to the PTSD and the genetic and environmental heredity of all the issues in their lives. Um, we know the research when you drop out. I mean, at this point in our world, it's very hard to even get a job anywhere without a high school diploma. And a lot of people in drug court were dropouts. And was really hard. One of the goals in drug court was to get a GED. They were forced to do that. Um, let's see. Alienated students and disengaged are more likely to give up. All right, now we know students who drop out, they're more likely to live in poverty, but unemployed, low-paying jobs, be involved in criminal behavior. We also know that adolescents can be a little egocentric. That's based on their brain, right? Their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, so they're not able to think in a way that morality comes later, and the ability to think from others' perspectives starts to develop after 18. Starting, and some go sooner, right? We talk about that. It depends on the kid. It depends on what's going on. There's invincibility fable, the belief that bad things happen to others who take risks, but I'm unique and immune from negative consequences. Raising my hand here. How many of you also felt that way in high school? Personal fable, the belief that they are unlike everyone else and no one experiences things in the same way. My parents don't understand how I feel. Also believe that they're the focus of everyone's attention, making adolescents super sensitive and overly concerned about the appearance or performance. And that's totally understandable and normal. So those are things that you need to know about. And how do you deal with a teen and adolescent's egocentrism? Okay, we're to reflection questions. I already gave you your form response. You can just read through these if you'd like. Thinking back to you being an adolescent and what would have worked for you. Um, what would you have needed? Sometimes I think about that when I'm counseling. What would have helped me? I will tell you that counseling teens really is about the relationship and helping them to trust you and empathizing with what they're going through. You don't want to start arguing with them about what they think about their parents. Not yet. You have to get really not arguing, but you have to listen to them and what are they into? And if they're into games or music, bring me your music. My teen that I saw over last summer, she would bring in all her music. I didn't know who Billie Eilish was, but now I do. And she would like play me the lyrics and tell me why she liked Billie Eilish. And um, I don't do traditional treatment plans with them. I do more all like front load the relationship and talking and playing games. There's like a Jenga game with questions, and there's stuff like that to keep them engaged, and also be really empathetic and compassionate, and also psycho ed about the brain. A little bit of psycho ed goes a long way. All right, I'm done with this. Chapter 11.